Castellanos, it will be a home run. And so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game.
Now back to the Bears Den with Drake Toll for a Baylor take on your lunch break.
Welcome back into the Petty Clinic Low T Bears Den. Well, 110 on Monday, and still no women's basketball coach at Baylor University. That's what we've all been watching, and I know I said it. I hoped it would come sometime around noon, 12:30 today. I thought early afternoon would be the time that Mac would go for it, just so they could fly whoever it is in tonight and get them in pretty early, but well, nothing yet. Still no announcement on who Baylor will hire as the head women's basketball coach. So we'll turn our attention to the men's basketball side. And Baylor just won a national championship. The recruiting game is still going on. James Akinjo now in a Bear uniform. And joining us to help us break it down from Heartland College Sports, Matthew Postins. Matthew, been a little bit. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, no problem, man. How you doing?
I'm doing. I'll tell you what. Middle of a coaching search, everything going on with the Kim Mulkey situation. I do want to get your thoughts, though. I mean, outside looking in, just from someone that covers sports, what do you make of this whole Kim Mulkey deal?
I thought it was really interesting when I heard about it. You know, first of all, her time at La Tech kind of overlapped with my time at SFA. Both were premier women's basketball programs at the time. She was an assistant there when I was covering the Lady Jacks at Stephen F. So I got to meet Kim very early in her career. Now, she wouldn't remember me from a hole in the wall, but I got the chance to interview her during a run in 93 when they played each other in the regular season, which back then that was a big game. It was like 2 top 15 ranked teams in the country at the time. You know, she'd been there such a long time. She'd done such an amazing job turning that program into something substantial and incredible, 3 national championships. Yeah, that said, everything runs its course to some degree. I know that she has a great affection for Louisiana. Can't imagine how hard it was to find good etouffee in Waco. Maybe that was a deciding factor in all this, but she's going to an LSU program that, you know, they've been good, but not great since Sue Gunner passed away. Sue was the head coach at SFA for a while before she went to LSU and built the program there. So, you know, LSU is getting a great coach, somebody who knows how to build a program, turn something into something incredible. And, she's set up Baylor to find somebody that I'm sure will be a Power 5 coach, somebody who's had success and is hungry to take the program, keep the program where it is now.
Matthew, moving over to the men's basketball side and for Baylor, I mean, we've talked women's basketball, football, and now into men's basketball today because recruiting's still a big thing, and the transfer portal is still very hot across the country. It sounds like Baylor is done, though, with the pickup of James Akinjo, and that's kind of where I want to start. What do you make of Baylor bringing James Akinjo on board to be a part of this squad? And is that the end game for Baylor when it comes to bringing in transfers?
Well, I mean, Big East Freshman of the Year, Pac-12 Player of the Year, first team? Why wouldn't you want him? Why wouldn't you want him? You know, with the fact that we know Mitchell's gone, we know Teague is gone, we're pretty sure Butler's gone. He hasn't announced it yet, but I think we all know he's probably going to head to the NBA, and I can't blame him. You know, bringing in a guy like a Akinjo who can play immediately, assuming he gets, I think he may need a waiver of some kind because he's already transferred once, depending upon how the rules read now. But you pair him with Flagler in the backcourt. LJ Cryer's back there now. He'll want more time and he should get more playing time. The recruiting class is incredible. You've got, you know, a top 36 prospect in Langston Love who could potentially play immediately. I mean, their backcourt's kind of set, you know, 3 recruits, all in the top 102 in the country. You bring in Akinjo, pair him with what you have. I think Mayer's coming back. I know he's in the draft pool, but I think this is just him getting his report card and he'll come back. I think it puts them in really good shape to be among the top contenders in the Big 12. I wouldn't rule out them bringing in one more player, especially if they find a transfer that they know will have to sit out a year for whatever reason. That's not going to happen very often now, but if there's somebody that they can transfer in and maybe just redshirt a year because they haven't used their redshirt, as long as they haven't used their redshirt, they can transfer anywhere. So they could take in another transfer, redshirt him for a year, and then bring him back off the roster in 2022. But I think they're pretty much set. Unless they're waiting to see what Butler does to do something with his scholarship, but I think they're set at this point. And it's hard to do the count this time of year because you have so many players in the portal and you're trying to keep track of the 13 scholarships. And like with a team like Iowa State's been nice. They've been updating their roster as players have been transferring away. So you kind of know who's on scholarship and who's not, but not every school is doing that to that degree.
Matthew, with Jared Butler not declaring for the draft yet, we've seen Maceo Teague do it. Mark Vidal's already announced that he's leaving, and obviously Davion Mitchell is on the front end of that, a guy that is a lottery pick and will likely go in the top 7 or 8 picks of the draft. But Jared Butler's been quiet. Nothing. Haven't heard. I saw him at a Chi Omega formal a week ago, but that's about it. What do you make of that? Why nothing yet? Why silence from a player of Jared Butler's caliber, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, first of all, the deadline to declare is later than usual. It's usually around the end of April. This year, it's around the end of May. And then the deadline to come back after you declare is around July. So the calendar's pushed back a little bit. So these players aren't in as much of a hurry to declare as they might have been previously. Butler's interesting because he looks like he's a first-round lock. Maybe not a lottery guy, but that's okay. I mean, I think he could fit in with a playoff team in the NBA that doesn't need a lot of guard help right away, and he could get acclimated to the game and make an impact as a 12, 15, 18-point guy right away. But, this time of year, you're getting a lot of information from a lot of different people. And this is the way I look at the NBA draft if you're coming out early, if you still have years in the table. If you're not a lead pipe lottery pick, you need to really think hard about whether you come out or not. Right now, Jared Butler's not a lead pipe lottery pick. He's a solid first-round guy. But Zaire Smith, who came out of Texas Tech as a freshman a couple of years ago, he was a solid first-round pick when he came out. He's not in the NBA anymore. So the thing you want to avoid if you're a player like Jared Butler is to be in a situation where, you come out early and you leave your eligibility on the table, and a couple of years later you're out of the league. I'm not saying that's the type of player Jared Butler is, but that's part of the math you have to do. Like if you're him or, to a lesser degree, Ochai Agbaji at Kansas, Miles McBride at West Virginia, guys who are second-round picks and will probably not move into the first round. Those are the types of guys who should come back for another year. Butler, I believe, will be a first-round pick if he declares, but players make decisions for certain reasons. Sam Bradford came back to Oklahoma, after winning a Heisman because he enjoyed college and he wanted to keep playing. Maybe Jared Butler's in that same mindset too. But it is interesting.
How shocked would you be if Jared Butler decided on the other side of this that he would come back to Baylor and play again next season for Scott Drew and the Bears? Is that something that would shock you?
I would be surprised, honestly. He's a guy that I've kind of pegged since probably mid-January he was going to go to the league because every mock draft that I've seen, he's been in the first round and pretty solidly at that. And, going to teams like the Lakers, the Clippers, the Bucks, teams where, he would sit there for a couple of years and learn from great players and be in really good situations.
Matthew, when it comes to the transfer portal, I know we mentioned James Akinjo, who was spectacular at Arizona, and now you look down the line of other Big 12 transfers here. I know Razir Bolton going to Gonzaga, Emmanuel Miller, a big pickup for TCU. There's Tyreek Smith, who's been mentioned, Davion Harmon to Oklahoma. When you weigh all the transfers in and out of the Big 12, what are some of the ones that really jump out to you that are going to shake this league up going into next season?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think Akinjo obviously could be that type of player, depending upon what happens with Butler. I think Texas has a really interesting array of guys. Jimmy Allen from Utah came in, averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds last year. I think he's going to start instantly for the Longhorns next season. They brought in some really good transfers. They could really do some things with those guys. Kansas had to bring in a couple of transfers, and I don't think that they brought in anybody, great, but I think the Cam Martin transfer is intriguing because he was a Division II All-American, and I'm really interested to see if a Division II player who was an All-American can step up and play at that level in the Big 12 next year. We saw Freddie Gillespie do it, going from D3 to D1, but he did it over the course of 2 to 3 years, got his game better. I'm interested to see if a player like Cam Martin can make the leap from D2 to D1 right away, because he'll be able to play right away. Maybe he's not going to have a huge impact on the conference, but he's the most intriguing transfer to me just because of where he's coming from at Central Missouri.
With that, look at guys like Davion Harmon, Rasir Bolton that are now out of the conference that have made their impact. And I mean, especially Rasir Bolton. Just what a loss for Otts in his first couple of weeks. Guys like that, I mean, the ones that are jumping ship, how is that going to change the face of this league moving into next season?
Well, going into the offseason, I thought Bolton was coming back. I thought Harmon was coming back. They're both gone now. With that, plus the early entries and all the transfers out, you're taking a lot of the experience that's in the conference with you. I mean, Iowa State really could have used Rasir Bolton just because of his experience alone at Division I basketball. Harmon was lined up to be the number one scoring option at Oklahoma next year before he decided to go to the draft and then transfer out. So you're robbing those two teams of some significant experience. The teams that, to me right now, that look the best set up are the ones that have kept most of their experience. Baylor, even though they're losing guys, they've got experienced guys coming back. Kansas lost a lot of kids to transfer, but it was lower level roster guys. West Virginia's lost a couple of kids to transfer, but only one starter. Still some question about whether Derek Culver's coming back next year based on what I'm hearing, but I think he ultimately will, because I don't think his game is ready for the NBA just yet. But the teams that are going to be good next year are the ones that have been able to hang on to their experience from a transfer standpoint. The teams that are really going to struggle, like Oklahoma, TCU, Iowa State, it's because they lost 6, 7, 8 guys to the transfer portal, including their experience. Oklahoma's going to be an interesting team to watch, because not just the transfers at the lower level, but Manick going to North Carolina, Harmon going to Oregon, losing Reeves to the draft. They're going to be in the lower half of the conference. They might be one of the worst teams in the conference next year.
Wow. Matthew, these new head coaches that we've got, the fraternity of guys, I say new, it's 4, 3 of which are new to the conference as head coaches, 2 of which are new to the conference compared to where they were last season. With the hires so far and from what you've seen, who has been the smash hit of keeping guys keeping the roster intact and pulling from the transfer portal?
Well, Beard at Texas. I mean, he's done a great job of bringing in guys from a transfer standpoint that can play right away. And really the only significant loss that he's had to this point is, Matt Coleman III going into the draft. Now, Courtney Ramey's declared, but he's leaving his eligibility open. So I think what he'll do is he'll get his report card and he'll come back. Andrew Jones has already said he's coming back. We're still waiting to hear what Jericho Sims will do because he has a year of eligibility left. We're still hearing what Greg Brown wants to do, the freshman. He's playing a lot of pickup basketball if you follow his Twitter feed, and he's always wearing Longhorn shorts. So everybody in Longhorn country goes, oh my God, that's a sign that he's coming back. Well, we don't know that yet, but he would be well served by coming back. His game needs more development. But if you think about, the players that, Beard has been able to convince to come back this year that were on Shaka's roster last year, plus the transfers that he's been able to bring in, this is pretty much the scenario that Texas was hoping for at this point. I'd love to see Sims come back. I'd love to see Ramey come back. If they come back, that team's going to be completely loaded.
I love that you mentioned the Texas shorts, because I can tell you when Petrino was fired at Arkansas in 2012, John Gruden wore a red tie on ESPN that night, and that was it.
Everybody lost their mind.
John Gruden was going to the University of Arkansas, so maybe the Texas shorts, maybe they'll be a little bit more lucky than the Razorback Nation was with John Gruden and his red tie.
It's the same logic that people use with Gruden, that he's a Tennessee guy because he married a Tennessee cheerleader.
Yep. So he's
a graduate assistant there for 1 semester. He's not a Tennessee guy, people.
He's going to Tennessee at some point in his career. That's what I keep hearing. Yeah. I keep telling he's replacing Derek Dooley. So you've got Weber and Dixon are the 2 names that I've written down that are hot seat. The seat's getting warm, at least going into next season. You felt the seat get warm this past year, and if it wasn't for Weber's late season turnaround, I don't know if he has a job at Kansas State come next year. But those 2 guys, what do you make of their job security at TCU and Kansas State going into next season between Bruce Weber and Jamie Dixon?
I think Weber's better positioned because he's been able to keep that talented freshman class that he brought in, and he committed early on to developing them. And Davion Bradford and Nigel Pack both had very good years for them that I think is going to serve them well going into next year. He's done a really good job of being really strategic with the transfer portal, bringing in guys that can help him in certain areas. having Mike McGurl come back for another year is extremely helpful because he was the one senior they had, and he decided to take advantage of that COVID year and come back for one more year. The thing that I'm really worried about with Jamie Dixon is this is the second time in 3 years that his team has been just completely decimated by transfers. They've lost 9 players to the portal, and they've brought in some good talent. They brought in some guys that can score some points, but this is really going to be a test of Jamie Dixon's ability to take all the pieces together and in a short amount of time, see if he can put the chemistry set together. We see Chris Beard do this at Texas Tech 2-3 years in a row, and he does a really good job of it. Is Jamie Dixon that kind of coach? Jamie Dixon said at the Big 12 tournament that there's really no building programs anymore. It's really about getting guys off the transfer portal and putting them together in a short-term lead up to a season. Is Jamie Dixon that kind of coach? I think we're going to find that out this year. And whether he's that kind of coach or not may determine how much longer he's at Texas Tech. So I think Weber's on safer ground right now than Jamie Dixon.
Jamie Dixon at TCU, I'll put it candidly. I want your thoughts on this. Are his days numbered right now?
I don't think they're numbered right now. I think the boosters like him. He's a legacy. He played there. He's got really good relationships with the university and with the alumni. I think they want that situation to work, much like Texas wanted the Shaka Smart situation to work. Anytime you bring back an alumni, you want that situation to work. So maybe you give that person a little bit more time than you might otherwise. But I don't think they're numbered just yet. But certainly, as you go into this season, watch how well they play early and then watch how well they play in Big 12 play, because the problem they've had the last 2 years is they play really well in non-conference. They have a really good start in the Big 12. And then they just go in the tank. And if they do that for a third straight year, then you're going to start hearing a lot of chatter about his job.
Hey, they said the same thing about Scott Drew for a long time. Maybe Jamie Dixon is the second Scott Drew, and no, just no.
Probably not.
Probably not. Matthew, going into next season, it's the last question I have for you today. It's way, way too early, but everybody does it, and we're going to do it too. And that is picking out your top 3 or 4 teams going into next year in the Big 12 that you think are going to vie for a conference title. Because when I look up and down the conference, I wouldn't be surprised to see 8 or 9 teams in the postseason and another 7 or 8 that make the NCAA tournament. What say you when it comes to the top of this conference moving into next year as of now?
If I'm trying to pick a top 4, it's Baylor. And not necessarily in any order. Baylor, Kansas will find a way to be a part of that conversation. Texas, West Virginia, and then the dark horse to kind of really crash that party, really have a say in it is Oklahoma State. Even without Cade Cunningham, they're going to be a really good team next year.
Wow. And Baylor's odds to win the Big 12 next season compared to Texas, because I think those are the top 2 in my opinion. I do believe they will be in the preseason rankings, especially if things hold as well as they're looking for Texas, and maybe Baylor brings in one more. Of those 2 teams, is there any early separation yet that you see?
I think the early separation for me is just the experience of Baylor winning a national championship and just having that on their shoulder. I don't see Scott Drew as being the kind of coach that's going to allow his team to become complacent. That's just not their nature. There are players on that team who played well this year, Adam Flagler, Matthew Mayer, who want to make names for themselves beyond that national championship team. Texas is going to be hungry. They're going to have a lot to prove. Those 2 games between those 2 teams are going to be incredible games. But right now, I'd probably put my money on Baylor finding a way to be the better team by the end of the Big 12 season than Texas.
Maybe so. It's going to be interesting to see Chris Beard at UT and what he's able to do in Austin next season. Matthew, our Bear Games question of the day is tailored to women's basketball because I am just refreshing Twitter with Baylor written in there. Just waiting for this hire today that I thought would come earlier today, and it hasn't. But our Bear Games question today, and I love getting outside opinion on stuff like this. And that is, in the first 3 seasons, what does Baylor's next women's basketball coach have to do to get a long-term contract?
Maintain the standard. And that doesn't necessarily mean national championships, but Baylor has been the dominant team in that conference for 10, 15 years now. And when you think about how good Texas was back in the day in the 80s and 90s under Jody Conrad, that's a big deal. That Kim was able to build that program up into something incredible. So whoever comes in and takes that job, they've got to maintain the standard. They've got to maintain this team being the best in the Big 12. Iowa State is usually really good. West Virginia usually pushes them. Every year, Texas is coming on. They had a really good year this year, too. So as we talk about men's basketball, obviously, and I follow the women's game, but I don't write about it because I just don't have the time. But the Big 12 Women's Conference is a very good conference. There are 4 or 5 really good teams in that conference every year. And for Baylor right now, whoever that hire is, they've got to maintain the standard, keep them at the top of the conference, and keep them in the national championship conversation.
Matthew, along with that, I know you said you follow the game. I do want to get maybe, and this is kind of a shot in the dark, but is there any one name out there that you've heard in the murmurs of this coaching hire that you really like that could be successful at Baylor?
I think I probably like the name that most everybody likes, and that's Kim Taylor at Georgia. Just a really good coach, a really solid hire. Seems to recruit well. She had to take over for a legend there at Andy Landers at Georgia, who I saw him coach back in the day when they came to the Midwest Regional in '96. Georgia had a player named Sadia Roundtree, who I think grew up in Celeste, Texas. They went to the Final Four that year, so I got to know Andy a little bit during those 2 days he was in Nacogdoches. But that's if you're going to succeed a legend like Kim Mulkey, why not hire somebody who's already had to do it once and has done it pretty well?
I love it. Matthew Postins from Heartland College Sports. Thanks for coming on the show today, as always. Pleasure to have you. Glad we got to talk to you again this week. And hopefully when we see you again, we'll have a Lady Bear basketball coach.
Hopefully so.
Always a pleasure. Matthew Postins, Heartland College Sports. I'm Drake Toll alongside Armstrong Sims. When we come back from this break, we're going to spend the last 30 minutes, the last half hour of this show talking nothing but women's basketball coaching hire, because that is what's big right now. I've got a mailbag that's opened up on SicEm365.com. We're going to break that down. Tomorrow's show, we're going to take men's tennis and women's tennis.